Good afternoon, everyone. We're back for another The Golden V podcast live stream, streaming live to our YouTube channel on Monday, December 16th, just a mere 9 days before Christmas Day. And a little bit of a different podcast this week. I should do a little background, but let's bring in Scott Hutter, who's an Edmonton Elks defensive back. Welcome, Scott. How are you?
I'm good, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. So there's a little bit of a story here, Scott. You and I actually met when we were both at the Grey Cup this year in Vancouver. I followed up with you via Twitter. I sent you a DM, and then we moved forward with trading emails back and forth about you coming on the podcast and talking about some CFL content. Just because I do a lot of BC Lions content, as people know on this podcast. I've covered all the recent press conferences at the Lions practice facility in Surrey, and obviously following all the moves there with the club and all the changes. But one thing I wanted to talk to you about, Scott, is there's been a lot of changes with the Edmonton Elks too, right? I mean, a couple things. Let's get started. First of all, obviously, Ed Hervey, and you and I talked about this off the air, not only being hired by the Edmonton Elks, but actually returning to the Elks just because of his time there prior, and then he moved to the BC Lions. Can you give me a little bit of sort of share some insights or share some thoughts on that move for the franchise?
Absolutely. Well, I've been fortunate to play with the Edmonton Elks and previously the Edmonton Eskimos franchise for 5 seasons now. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of changes in management and coaches over my tenure there. Unfortunate because that means that in pro sports, you're not winning. And that's
Right.
the name of the game. Everyone wants to be winning. Everyone wants to be a stable franchise and enjoy the fruits of our labor. Going forward, I think the franchise is in really good hands. I think Mr. Hervey is definitely the right man for the job, and I'm looking forward to seeing that franchise how that franchise can flourish under his leadership.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing, right? Because it's not only Ed, it's also Mark Killam, who has also been hired as head coach. What do you know about Mark? I mean, I don't I try to follow as many transactions as I can in different CFL teams and franchises, even though my podcast focuses on the BC Lions because we're a Vancouver, Canada-based podcast. But what's the feeling around the team with Mark's being hired?
Right.
Because
Yeah, Coach Killam has been a respected coach out of Calgary with the Stampeders now for a number of years, coaching their special teams unit. Lots of players that have played for Coach Killam in the past, lots of players, including myself, that have played against his units in the past, know that his teams are always very disciplined, very well coached. So he's definitely someone that I'm looking forward to potentially working with, and
right.
trying to win some football games.
Yeah, because it's been really tough for you guys since 2019. I remember how tough 2019 was as a BC Lions fan, and the game that I went to start the season, and you guys actually, being the Edmonton Elks, beat us pretty handily at home. That kicked off the 2019 home season for us. But since that season, there have been some huge challenges in Edmonton, and I should have Google searched them, but I seem to remember a couple of them pertaining to how many games you guys went without winning a football game in the CFL. And so how do you think someone like Mark will help with that?
Well, I mean, as storied of a franchise as the Edmonton Elks are, the last few years have been a little bit of a rough patch. But when you're in the building, I can tell you that every day is a new day, and we focus on trying to accomplish what we need to accomplish that day and that week to winning a football game that week. And your question of how Coach Killam can come in and help turn that around. It's not going to be just Coach Killam. It's going to be all the coaching staff and all the management and all the staff and athletic staff and third floor staff as far as business ops and players. It's going to include a lot of players as well. It's going to have to be a full team effort. And I think, that's the beautiful thing about football is that just looking at the positions on the field, I play defensive back in special teams. I'm not going to be able to do the quarterback's job. Quarterback's not going to be able to do my job. I'm not going to be able to block a defensive lineman like the offensive line is going to be able to do. So it really has to be that cohesive team unit. And, looking forward to doing my part to try and help build that.
Yeah, it's really interesting too. I was doing some research, and a couple of things we talked about with you off the air. And one of the things we're gonna talk a few things. But let's move into free agency. And I had a couple of thoughts I noted down here. First of all, is you are a free agent, or you're in the free agent list. And feelings on movements for the CFL. It's February 11th of next year. Just looking at it, and then the CFL players are slated to become free agents. The communication window, in which teams can openly speak with pending free agents or their CFL players association registered designates is February 2nd to February 9th. So a couple things. Share a little bit about what's happening with you in free agency if you can, your thoughts on that process, and then we'll look at some of the Elks free agents.
Absolutely. Well, this is actually my first opportunity to go into an off season without a contract for the next season. So this is all kind of a new area for me as well.
Right. Okay.
For your listeners that might not know how the free agency in the CFL works, free agency opens mid-February, where teams can officially offer contracts and officially sign deals. However, there's at the beginning of February something called the tampering period. And what the tampering period is the ability for teams to call your agent, call yourself, and say, this is what we're willing to offer you as far as a contract. And the idea there is that you can collect all the information, go back to your previous team and say, can you help match what's going on here in free agency for me? So, a couple months away from that right now, not really focused on any of that too much right now, just worried about trying to get healthy this off season. Unfortunately, last year I had a major knee injury. I tore my ACL, so had to get surgery to repair that. So really just excited on the opportunity to have this off season to get healthy and get back out on the football field doing what I love to do.
Yeah, and I just wanted to share that article. Actually, it comes up in the background there, Scott. You should be able to see it as it moves in, and we're having a chat. This thing I found in 3 Down Nation, and they have so much great football content. Trying to scour around and look for different resources. This was the article on July 22nd of this year announcing your season-ending injury, which we talked a little bit about off the air. Let me know how that's going and how you think that's going to affect your free agent period. Or your free agency?
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as I'm concerned right now, I'm just focused on attacking rehab every day. It is definitely a major injury that I've seen a lot of people endure during my career, but a lot of people have success coming back from. It is a grind. I was telling some of my close friends and family at the beginning, right after surgery, that it's standing at the bottom of a mountain, because right after surgery you can't use your leg at all. Right? You have major knee surgery, and all of a sudden, you can't even walk. You can't even lift your legs. So it's
I know nothing about it. Never happened to me.
Definitely something that is a day by day struggle. Yeah, no, happy to report that things are moving along in a good timeline, and feeling better and better every day, and just trying to focus on the small wins every single day.
Yeah, that's important. I'm glad to hear that, because I was reading about the injury and I was like, oh man, just this sort of amount of pain associated with that. And when I was reading the article, I'd forgotten this, how McLeod Bethel spoke out on the regarding the danger of playing on short weeks. Any thoughts on that? Because I follow McLeod with sort of some interest and intrigue just because of his past success in the CFL. What are your thoughts on something like that too? Because he made a pretty, profound statement about that, and then he got fined, right? So, like what?
And like, I mean, I won't comment too much on it, because I don't want to get fined as well. But the CFL did make a shift in the last couple of years as far as our summer schedule. One game Thursday, one game Friday, one game Saturday, one game Sunday. And then, when the NFL comes on in the fall, that schedule moves to a couple games on Friday and a couple games on Saturday. It definitely has showed some increase in viewership, having one game. And as a fan myself, I really enjoy it as far as having
I do
game 4 days every week during the summertime. Really good exposure and really good access to our great game. But definitely sometimes that leaves short weeks on the schedule. And as far as players are concerned, sometimes unfortunately that means that you're not as rested, as recovered. So going forward, hopefully that we can sort it out to a point where we can reduce injuries to you're never going to eliminate injuries from football, unfortunately.
No, I don't think anybody would ever expect that. I know I certainly wouldn't.
I had a great coach one time say, it's not if you get injured, it's when you're going to get injured, unfortunately. Just the nature of the beast in the game of football. But hopefully, with new studies and new technologies coming out in the generations to come, we can see a world where we can limit some of these injuries.
Yeah, and so one thing I'm going to try and share too, it should pop up, but it's a little different when you're sharing articles on web browsers versus these little pictures I downloaded from the CFL's website. Because the reason I downloaded this one, and it started with the Elks, and we'll try and get through a few before we have to wrap it up. But you guys have 3 top free agents, and I think actually Trey Ford's been signed. I should have looked it up, but there's Trey Ford, Niles Morgan, linebacker, and then Eugene Lewis at wide receiver. Did Trey sign a contract?
Yeah, so that actually got announced last week.
That's what I thought.
It was signed to a 3-year extension. So, very, very happy for him. I can say as far as all 3 of those guys are concerned, I've played with them for at least 2 years, some of them longer. And, all great teammates, all great locker room guys, obviously all great players on the field. It really is the best part of playing in the CFL is the people that you get to meet. But unfortunately, it's also the worst part of playing in the CFL is saying goodbye to so many great people because of the nature of pro football, right? It's not just in the CFL; it's down south in the NFL as well. You see a lot of movement, player movement. It's just having to be professional and take care of the business side of things as well.
Right, and because that's one of the things I wanted to ask you too. I know we talked about it. We've covered your injury, free agency, some guys on the team, but I'll share. There's a huge list of free agents for every team, and it seems to happen every year. And I hear in various media outlets and TSN or local sports shows here in Vancouver, just a little bit about how a lot of fans, and I've got opinions from people who are involved in football, operationally don't like the amount of free agents that seem to pop up all the time, and how there's just so much, sometimes so much player movement and turnover that it's harder to build a brand, and it's sometimes harder for the fans to keep up with, the CFL and staying loyal to one franchise. Do you have any sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was definitely a big thing a couple years ago when we negotiated the newest collective bargaining agreement as far as from the Players Association side towards the league, now giving players the ability to guarantee up to 50% of the last year of their contract if they sign a multi-year deal. So the CFL recognizing that fans and teams want to be able to lock in players for a longer term, but as far as the player side, why would a player sign a longer term contract if they are not guaranteed any sort of compensation in those later years, right? Basically putting all the chips across the table into the team's area there. So, definitely something that I think is changing. Some of the deals that you're seeing now, less 1-year deals. You're seeing more 2 and 3 year deals.
Right.
We talked about Trey signing a contract extension. That was a 3-year deal. The Elks actually just re-signed Javon Leake as well. That was a 2-year deal reported. So definitely something to watch going forward. But I think it's definitely been something that's been identified by the league, and making moves to try and adjust that.
Interesting. Because, I just looking down at some of the Elks list, I know I shared it in the chat. You should be able to see it in the public chat. Maybe I can sort of lay it over here. Look at the amount of free agents you guys have, including McLeod Bethel-Thompson, right? Because he came in at QB last year. And you can probably speak a little bit more. I got a few more minutes to chat with you about this sort of stability that he brought to the franchise, given his past success in Toronto and winning the Grey Cup there. And there's a chance he could be out the door. Like, it's a bit not surprising, but it's
the nature of the CFL sometimes, unfortunately, especially when the franchise hasn't made the playoffs in a certain number of years, and you see management have new hires and the coaching staff get an overhaul, and fortunately, unfortunately, however you want to slice it, that means that the roster is going to get some sort of overhaul as well. If you look across the league, that's not always the case. The epitome of consistent success, I'll say, in the last few years has been the Winnipeg Blue Bombers franchise. And if you look at the bottom on their roster, there is some overhaul, but not as much as some other teams, right? So what came first, the chicken or the egg? Is it the consistency of the roster that helps win you football games, or is it winning football games that helps make the roster more consistent, right? So it's a little bit of a cat and mouse game there. Ultimately, I think that this is also something that is a different element to our game in Canada that sometimes people overlook as a negative, is that it doesn't take 5-6 years to rebuild a franchise. Sometimes it can be as quickly as just a 1-year turnaround, and all of a sudden you're out of the basement and you're competing for the Grey Cup because of the amount of roster turnover and short number of years on the contracts. And you're able to through free agency, through the CFL draft, through the global program, however you want to slice up your roster, you're able to bring in new talent and compete for those Grey Cups.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And one of the things I was thinking about too is, just for myself, I mean, I know the challenges the Elks had this season, and run a podcast that focuses on Vancouver sports and the BC Lions, but I have a lot of passion and care for the CFL myself, and a lot of sentimentality toward it, if I were to be honest. And so I'm following other franchises, and I feel, I know it feels like to be a Lions fan and feel the pain and suffering. We had a few years there, especially right after Wally Bono left in 2018, and to see you guys struggle that much, I'm like, well, that's not really fun or pleasurable to watch the franchise be, like that, struggle that much, right? Because what it's like for the fans. But one of the things that I found really interesting was just changes in the CFL, and you mentioned the consistency of Winnipeg and the changes, right? But look at the amount of changes Winnipeg has experienced now. Even though they lost the Grey Cup, Buck Pierce came here, right? I mean, it's a great opportunity for Buck. It's a full circle moment for him 20 years later, after he was first picked up as a quarterback. And the gentleman who left and went to Hamilton from Winnipeg, I can't remember his name. And then just, Winnipeg lost the Grey Cup, and they made changes, right? The BC Lions made some pretty wholesale changes when you think about no more Rick Campbell, no more Vernon Adams, and a real commitment to Nathan Rourke, and a real commitment to Buck Pierce, but also to Ryan Rigman as GM. So even when a team has success in the CFL, or is considered one of the model franchises of the last 5 years, and they don't win the Grey Cup, and people poo-poo them losing 3 straight Grey Cups when they've been in 5 in a row. I mean, that's, to me, I was like, wow, how could you knock that franchise when they were in the Grey Cup 5 times and won 2 out of 5?
That's great. And some of those hires are just a fact of, you're doing such a good job. You mentioned Buck Pierce, doing such a good job with Winnipeg's offense over the last couple of years that, someone's willing to give him that head coaching title, in the BC Lions. So, it kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Sometimes if you're at the bottom of the standings, you're making wholesale coach changes. And then if you're at the top of the standings, you have some of those other teams poaching some of your coaches and your players as well. So, and that's just pro football. If you look across the NFL, the same thing happens.
Oh yeah, no, I see it all the time in the NFL.
You see it all the time. So it's just the reality of the business side of pro football. And ultimately, I think that's what can make the sport so exciting is every year is a fresh start, especially, going into this next season. We have so many new headlines. You mentioned a couple of them, so many new teams, so many new faces. So what group of people can be the group that comes together quickest and strongest and make a run for that Grey Cup?
Yeah. And let's wrap it up. But let me just do this to you to give you one kind of tough question, but it's not a big deal. Who's going to win the Grey Cup in 2025?
Well, at the current moment, I'm, you mentioned earlier that I am a free agent. I'm not under contract right now. So I'll say with great hope in my voice that, whatever team that I am playing for next year will win the 2025 Grey Cup.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll see you in BC. Who knows, right? Never know. We'll see. All right, Scott. Thanks a lot for doing this.
Yeah, appreciate it.